Hi everyone and welcome to the nFORM version 5.0 walkthrough. I'm Logan Korn from Windsor Solutions, and today I'll be guiding you through the latest updates and features in the new Form Designer. So whether you're a longtime user or just getting started, this walkthrough is designed to help you get comfortable with the changes and take advantage of everything version 5.0 has to offer. Here's a quick look at what we'll be covering. We'll start with a look at creating a form and the header functionality, then move on to a deep dive on form settings, covering everything from general settings to landing page content, certification, fees, and more. We'll also touch on guest payer access, form revisions, pre-populations, and integrations. From there, we'll look at working with templates, explore the new designer interface, and wrap up with the processing tabs. Let's jump in. So this is how you're going to create a form. I went to Manage, Forms, and then Add Form. Now, as you see, we're going to ask you for 3 pieces of preliminary information. This is going to help form designers hit the ground running with required information that every form needs. I'm going to select the parent organization. So that's the organization that this form will live in. And then the tag. And I'm going to make it random. That way it doesn't conflict with any other forms because you cannot have duplicate tags. So every form tag must be unique. Then I click Add New Form. Now once this is created, you're going to see these 3 pieces of information that I put in when I created that form. As mentioned, this is going to allow me to hit the ground running and focus on other things and get that form created quicker. Now let's start at the top here, up at the header. You see the form name, the status, which is draft, and version 1.0. Draft and version 1.0 because we just created this form. Next, in the middle of the header here, you see the Settings, Designer, and Processing tabs. Now, if you're familiar with the older version of nFORM, this is replacing the steps 1, 2, and 3. So this is a more logical approach to help the form designers really know exactly where to find the Settings, Designer, and Processing. You no longer have to memorize what's in step 1, 2, or 3. Next is this handy icon up here. When you hover over it, you'll see when your changes were last saved. So here we see my changes were last saved right when I created this form. So as you see here, the Publish button is actually grayed out. So we cannot use this because there are still some requirements to be met for this to be a fully functional form. So this is going to be grayed out until we satisfy those. And we'll get those pieces here in a sec and where you can figure out what you need to do to publish a form. Next to the Publish button, there's this drop-down where you can deactivate a published form or delete a form. Next is that Preview button. So this is going to be perfect for form designers if you want to check your work and make sure your form is going in the right direction to that end goal that you have for your published form. So this is a good way to check throughout that process, and you can go through and actually fill out a preview of your form. Next is something that's brand new to nFORM, and that's the Publishing to-do list. So once you click on the Publishing to-do list, you'll see a handful of items that need to be taken care of. For this form specifically, we're going to need form instructions, address, certification statement, and one section is required. And that's because one section and at least one control are required to get a form created. The cool thing about this is if you do click on one of these items, let's say certification statement, it's going to take me to where this information lives. It took me to certification, as you see on the left-hand side, and here's the certification statement that's required. Now, if you don't use a publishing to-do list and you just want to go off of these icons, you can actually see what sections need your attention with the red dot indicator. Now, next to the publishing to-do list is an action menu. Here you can export form properties, export the form itself, or clone the form. Now, the difference between export form properties and export form is that export form properties is going to give you the properties of the form in an Excel spreadsheet. That way you can get a closer deep dive into the form properties. Or you can export the form with this export form button, and that's going to be exporting for import purposes. So if you want to export the form and then import it into a new environment, this is going to be the button you'll use. Next is something that's also brand new to nFORM, and that's the full screen editing mode. So once clicked, as you see, it takes me to full screen. It's a good way to minimize distractions and to just get a better view of everything that's on your screen. Now to exit full screen, I just click the button again, or I could press escape on my keypad. Now let's go through these general settings. If I wanted to edit those form details, I can click this pencil icon here. You're going to see a couple of those throughout the form settings. And once clicked, it'll actually open up a modal that shows all of these fields ready to edit. So this is just one of the few ways you can edit the form configurations. Here we have the form name, the form tag, and the organization. That's actually what we set up when we created the form, if you do recall. After that is the short description. So this is going to be a description for the form, and it is not required, it is optional. We're just going to leave that blank for now. After that are the identifying keywords. So these are keywords that are used if you want to categorize your forms. So say I typed in demo and added that keyword. Now when I'm in the form finder and I search the word demo, not only are the names of the forms that have demo going to appear, but also the forms with the keywords demo. Now before I navigate away from this, I do want to point out a new icon that we're using in nFORM. So this globe icon is referring to global variables or global settings that when changed, they will affect every version of the form. And also something cool about these is they can be edited while the form is published. So in the past, to change any setting within a form, and a published form specifically, you would actually have to turn that into a draft, change the setting, and then republish that form. But we're actually allowing the form designer to change a handful of things while the form is published. But bear in mind, doing so will affect every version of the form. So I'm going to save the changes. Now let's talk about usage settings. On the top here is the online submissions toggle. So if you want this form to be accessible and be able to be filled out online, you're going to want to have that on. However, if I only want an offline form available and I have a copy of a form that I want them to download and print, then I can select or drag and drop the file here. But for this, we're going to have it be an online submission. Under this, you have an internal use only. And so as you see, this is one of those global variables I just mentioned. So this is something that you can change when the form is published, and it will affect every version of the form. This is going to make it so that only internal users, which are users that are signed up to your organization, can access the form. Now, if an external user tries to access my form while I have this on and they somehow get a direct link to it, they will only be able to see the landing page. They will not be able to start the form. Next are the alternate ID settings. Now, what happens if you forget what the alternate ID settings are, or what an alternate identifier is? We actually thought of that. So throughout the form designer settings, there are these question mark icons. And when hovered over, it explains exactly what that setting does. So this is going to allow you to set up a unique identifier for your submissions. Something like permit number, or something a little bit more specific that help you search for the form and identify that form. So once turned on, I will then have to select a label display and a required Alt ID control. So this is best to set up after you have some controls in there, so you can select actually what control drives this value. Next is something also brand new to nFORM, and that's going to be guest access settings. So for guest access settings, this is going to allow you to invite a guest to a form once that form is submitted, and they can make a one-time online payment for that form. So once I turn this on, I then am able to select the length of time that they have access to the submission. I chose 4 days for this one. I'll show this off a little bit more later as to how you invite a guest. Here's some additional general settings here, and they also have toggles to be able to turn them on or off. Now, the main one worth mentioning here is the allow to print blank form, not to be confused with the allow offline submissions or offline form available setting. So allow print blank form will actually allow the user or the applicant to print out a blank form of the form that you're designing in here, which is different than uploading a PDF, if you will, for the offline submission. So once again, this is going to be a form that you upload, not designed in nFORM. And print blank form is going to print the nFORM blank form. Next, we're going to move on to landing page content. So this is the landing page content settings section, and this is going to change what you see before you begin the form. It's that form landing page. So it's important to get the proper instructions and mailing address in there, along with contacts, links, and FAQs. Depending on how complex your form is, these are all incredibly helpful pieces of information. As you see the form instructions and mailing address, they're actually required for every form. So let's go ahead and fill that out. I don't have anything fancy to put in here because we're just making a test form right now. But I do have the ability to make different changes to the formatting of this. So I can change it to different heading styles. I can change the size of text. I can bold, italicize, strike through, underline, and other options as well. I can even add pictures. If I go a little too far and get a little click happy with the formatting, I can clear out the formatting with this button. But we're just going to leave it nice and plain. Next is the mailing address. So as you see, the address is actually required, just like as you saw in the publishing to-do list. And the form instructions actually fell off of this to-do list, so you don't need to check it when you get it done. The system's actually going to know when you get it taken care of, and it will fall off of your list. Let's go ahead and add in a filler address here. I'm going to save those changes. Now moving on to the contacts. This is where you're going to add different important contacts for that form. Let's add a couple so I can show you guys something real quick. So I have the label, which is an email, and then the actual value of the email itself. I'm going to add one more just so I can show a feature off real quick. We're going to add a phone. Now I have two pieces of contact information here. Say I wanted the email up top, I can simply click, drag, and drop to change the ordering of these. Same goes for links and FAQs. So if I added multiple links, I can drag and drop to change the order, and same with frequently asked questions. That is going to be the landing page content. So this will show up, as I mentioned, on that landing page before the form is started. Next is certification. Certification is referring to access settings and signature settings. So for this one, let's just show what it looks like to require a signature. We're going to do electronic signature, and we're going to enable signing invitations. So as you see, once clicked, you actually see more information and more settings under that. That's kind of an approach that we're taking with the nFORM form designer so that you don't see too much information. So it's not overwhelming as a form designer, whether new or seasoned. It is overwhelming to have a lot of fluff and unimportant information on the page. Let's turn on role-based signing. You can assign different signing roles to different people at the end of the form. So once you're done filling out the form, one of the last steps in that signing step, you'll be able to assign different emails to different signing roles. So if you have different people that need to sign your form, or an applicant has different people that they need to invite to sign it, this is where you will set that up. Simply click Add Signing Role, enter the name, whether it's optional or not, certification statement for signing, and then help text to help them know what they're signing and the important information regarding the form. Now, as you see, the submission settings, both of these are locked in the on position. That is because I have Chrome Air on, and Chrome Air is an enhanced certification for signing. If I turn that off, I can simply go ahead and edit these the way that I want. But right when it's on, these will be stuck on the on position. And that's so we're taking the guesswork out of whether your form is Chrome Air compliant or not. And once you have that on, we're requiring these because they're required for Chrome Air. Now let's go ahead and add this certification statement in here. I'm going to click Save Changes, and it satisfied that piece of information. Now the only thing we have left on our publishing to-do list is that we need a section and controls. We'll get to that later. Next are fees. And I'm actually going to head over to a more populated form to show you what the fee line items look like. This is a form created just to demo the fee line items. Now, as you see, we're accepting a fee payment, and we're doing electronic and mail-in payments. So either way you want to give us money, we'll take it. We're not going to require a payment prior to submission, but if you had this on, they would have to pay for that form to get through the submission process. And that would be done at the end of submitting the form. Next are the mail-in payment options. Again, this is enabled because we're doing electronic and mail-in payments. So you have to have a payment remittance address in there. You can even use your own custom payment voucher. Now, if you don't have that on, then it's going to use a default nFORM payment voucher, which I'll show in a sec. So next is something new to nFORM, and that's going to be the fee line items. Usually we would have just one line fee, and you would have to configure it accordingly. But with this, it's actually going to be multiple lines. I could even add more if I wanted to. But with this specific example, we have the flat fee of $50. And as you can see, I can drag and drop to change the order. And then we have a revision fee. So let's start up at the flat fee. The code for it is sub. The description explains it properly, fee for submission. It's not going to use any submission data because, as mentioned, it's a flat fee. So there's going to be a flat $50 fee for the submission, and that's it. It's not going to add on any more if you revise it or anything of that nature. However, this next fee line item, the revision fee, does use submission data, and it is going to add $10 every time the form is revised. Now, say I forget what this is configured to. Clearly, it's configured to the revision calculator. However, if I click here on that I icon, I actually can see the control type, its tag, and what section it's living in. Also, it shows you the fee formula that's within that control. So that's going to save you some clicking from going into the designer, into the section, into the control, and looking at the fee formula if this answers what you're looking for. So as you see from this fee formula, every time the submission is revised, it's going to add $10 onto that fee. So I'm going to show how that works here in a bit once I finish up going through these settings. Now, once you do link one of these line items to a control, then this minimum and maximum are going to appear. So if you don't see them, then it's likely because you only have a flat fee. There's a lot of control and no questions. If you have a flat fee, it's going to be just that flat fee. But having the min and max is a good way to put guardrails on your fee to make sure it's not too low or not too high. Right now, we just don't want it to go over $80. Next, you have the payment processor information. So this wasn't originally editable within the form settings with the last version of nFORM. This made it a little difficult to find and to edit. But now we added it in the fee section because that's a logical place for it to live. So we focus on a lot of logic here with the settings, layout, and the new designer process. Now, if I want to edit this payment processor, I simply click this pencil icon, and I can change the payment processor this way. We did just add OrbiPay, which is a Bank of America payment processor, and we're consistently adding new payment processors that are supported. Now, as you see, the override payment processor's default settings are on. So this allows me to actually edit the keys for the payment processor, or I can turn that off and use the default settings. So let's take a look at those fee line items in action. I'm going to quickly fill out the form. This is a very simple form, just with a name control. I'm going to certify and submit that form. Now, as you see, that flat fee of $50 is working and showing. So right now, the only thing I have to do is $50. I'm going to elect to pay later and view my submission. Now here's my submission overview. I can do things like view my form, begin review, and revise. There's also other options down here. But right now, I'm going to go ahead and revise this submission. There's a warning, just letting the user know that the form will not receive further review until I completed the submission process. So it's going to lock things up until I'm done revising it. I'm going to capitalize my name. I'm going to go to review. And as you see, I already got $10 added to my flat fee. That's because it's revision 1 and it adds $10 every revision. I'm going to submit this form. And you'll see that total has gone up here as well. Same thing, I'm going to elect to pay later. And let's see how these line items show on a payment voucher. So here's the payment voucher I downloaded. This is actually what the default payment voucher looks like. It's going to give you that submission information up top. We actually have those fees line by line here. So the fee for submission, which is that flat fee, is $50, and the revision fee is $10. Now, if I did another revision, it would not add a new line. It would make this $20 for a total of $70. There's more information down here at the bottom of the default payment voucher. Again, you can use a custom voucher and you can have it with your branding and have these line items laid out in different ways that satisfy how your organization is set up or how you want the form voucher to look like. And that's the fee line items. Now, before we navigate away from the submission overview, I'm actually going to show you how to share guest access if we wanted them to make this $60 payment for us. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom here, and on the right-hand side, we're going to click Share With. I'm going to add user access, and I'm going to type in an email address that does not exist in our current organization. Then my access level, I'm going to give them viewer. It's the only thing I can give somebody that is not in the system. As you see, I get a warning letting me know that I'm about to grant access to the email entered. And since there is no account associated with the email, anyone who receives the invitation will still be able to access the form without signing in. So I'm going to share access. As you see, they're listed here under submission access. And they get temporary viewer access that expires June 6th. So that's that expiration I was referring to earlier. If you forget what temporary access is, hover over and it gives you more information. I'm going to revoke this because this is not actually somebody we want to come in and edit this. So I'm going to go ahead and remove access, but I could also resend the access link if I wanted to. Revoke. So that's it for the submission overview page. Next, we have the form revisions and history. So this is going to have different pieces of information regarding different versions. So we have date tracking here. So that's going to tell you who last updated this version and when. We also have the revision notes. And so you can add a note by going in here, and you can even require it for anybody that publishes the form. Now say I wanted information on version 1.0, because right now we're on version 1.1 with this form specifically. I'll simply click on that version to expand it. And there you can see different information in here. This one only has date tracking in it because no revision notes were added, and this setting was not on when this was published. but I can actually navigate to this version of the form by simply clicking on version 1.0. So now we're taken to the version 1.0 of this form, which is actually in the published status. Before I navigate away and go back to the current version by clicking on this, I'm actually going to show what it looks like when a form is published and what you can and can't change. So as you see, a lot of things are grayed out here. These are non-global settings and settings you cannot change while the form is published. However, different things are lit up where I can make the changes. This makes it easy and takes away the guessing game for you. So I click into this and I can actually edit these global icons. I can add keywords, responsible organization can be changed, and same with the form tag. And again, this will affect all other versions of the form, whether higher or lower than the current version you're on. And that's going to be the form revisions and history section. It allows different form designers to collaborate and to track changes or even go back and see what changes you made if you take a break from designing a form. I'm simply going to click on this to go back to the current version. So let's head over to pre-populations. Pre-populations is next in the settings column, and it does have a lot of info in here. Now, let's start up at the top, previous submission prefill. So this is going to allow users to select a previous submission and use its data to prefill the current form. And as you see, I am actually reading what's under here because we have included some help text under each of these different types of prefill to help you remember what they are. So this allows me to select a source form and map the controls. As you saw, this is a pretty small form, so there's only one control mapping available. And let's take a look at what that looks like. So this is going to be that full name control, and it's going to use one of the previous submissions from this feed demo form to fill it out. And so you'll actually get that option as a dropdown above the control itself when you're filling out the form. As it states, this is a good way to reduce time and errors. Next is the external source prefill. So you can enable this to prefill forms with SQL data. So this is going to be a SQL query that's going to be used in your database, and you can access it using a context identifier. This is going to pull that data in and fill out your form. This does require some more advanced configuration, so we're not going to cover that in this demo. That might be a good demo to have in the future, setting up SQL prefill. But I can add context identifier by simply clicking this. I would choose a label in the instructive text. The context identifier, as mentioned, is going to link this form with your SQL query. And so when that user starts that form, actually on the landing page, I should say, they're going to get the ability to put in a context identifier, which will then pull that information in. And when the form is started, it will be filled out with that information. Now, you can make it so the user can only use contexts that relate to them. You can inject security roles. You can auto-complete suggestions, or you can also require external data source. It's important to note that if you do autocomplete suggestions, technically speaking, the applicant can fish for other data. So this is really important to keep in mind if you have sensitive data in that external source prefill. Let's turn that off and collapse this. Next is the XML prefill. This is really used for large sets of data, and it's not used as often. However, if you do want to use it, you would download this XML schema and populate it from there. Here you have 3 different fields to fill out for it as well. If you forget what they are or don't know what they are, you can simply hover over the question mark to get more information. We're not going to be diving too deep into prepopulations right now. That might be a better thing to go through for an advanced demo. So I'm going to turn this off and it will collapse. Next is the Integrations tab. So this is going to be where you would set up different file system, SharePoint, or FileNet integrations. Let's just take a look at the file system integration for now. This is going to be that third and final way of editing a field. Simply hover over and you get this edit dialog box. I'm going to click it and it brings up these fields to edit. We're using a custom path right now for the file system integration, and you can even have different variables added in with this nifty little path builder. We're going to do form tag and org code for this. If I wanted SharePoint on, I can simply click it on. Same with FileNet integration. And this is going to control if post-submission documents are included in the file transfer. So this can either have those documents be included or not included, just depending on your form's configuration and the information you need in your file transfer. Next is going to be templates. This is where your document and text templates live. So you can go and add your document template by simply clicking here. You would give it a name. You would drag and drop your file or upload it by clicking Select File. And once uploaded, you can actually use a previous submission and generate a test version of this document. So this is a good way to organize that submission data into a document template. But we're not going to be setting that up for this form, so I'm going to click Cancel. Text templates are reusable text templates for common messages. I can add one here with a name and a message. Last but not least is the internal data. In the past, when clicking internal data in the previous version of nFORM, it would actually bring you to a new tab. We've baked it in, and you can actually do it inline here. So internal data controls help with file transfer or financial or payment processing. So you can go ahead and configure it by clicking Add Control and filling it out accordingly. Now we're not going to dive too deep into this because it's rather complex. So that might be best for an advanced demo that I keep mentioning. For the designer portion, I'm going to head back over to the form we created together. As you see, this form has no sections and no controls. So the only option I have here is to add a section, because you need a section to house your control. So I can add a new section or an existing section from the existing form. This is a good time saver and a good way to reuse sections that work. Maybe a personal information section that you have on a different form, or maybe you create a form with a lot of different sections in it that have best use cases within it. So you can actually keep pulling from that form. It's a little form designer trick that you might want to keep up your sleeve. Now we're going to add a new section for this. And as you see, there's 3 tabs up at the top, just like this header, but only one of them can be accessed. I'll get to why here in a sec. I'm going to type in that information. Now, as you see, there's some toggles down here, and that's actually going to control these as well. So I want to disable the clear section button if I don't want them to be able to clear an entire section's contents. I find it to be useful and a good time saver for applicants, so I'm going to leave that on the off position because I don't want that disabled. Now you can show the section's autofill control. You can make the section optional. You can also conditionally display the section. So this can be driven by controls or just a Boolean formula that you put in the condition. So I'm going to head over to this tab. As you see, it's successful now since I turned this on. So it must be on for me to go to this tab. This just feeds into that idea that I mentioned earlier of only showing you things that you can use and things that are important to the form designer. Here I can build my formula, and if you need a little bit of help, you can click Show More. I have access to a list of tags. These are going to be global variables. Once I start getting controls in this form, there's also going to be variables that are linked to those controls. I have operators. So this is going to help you just with knowing how, say, multiply numbers, how you would do that and what symbol you would use. So when clicked, it adds that in there for me. And then the different functions. And so this is really going to help empower you to get this conditional display going. So if I wanted it to display only if a short text control contains certain characters, then I can do that. Now I'm going to go ahead and go back to this and turn conditionally display off. Next is repeating fields. As you see, it's that other grayed out tab. So I'm going to turn this on. And I actually forget what repeating fields are. Well, don't worry. We actually have this help icon here. So it actually allows this section and its fields to repeat for multiple entries. So you'll be able to add a new section and it would be blank versions of those controls, or you can copy it and it would be the filled out versions of those fields. Here are the repeater settings. So once you turn these different settings on, you get more options. So you can disable the ability to add new repeater items. So you can just configure the exact amount that you would like. You can disable the ability to duplicate these items. You can disable the ability to delete the items. You can require repeater item uniqueness and what control you want to be forced to be unique. So you can't have the same value in every version of that control. You can also dynamically name the repeaters. In addition, you can sort the repeating sections, say if there's numbers being used, or even alphabetically. So I'm going to go back over here and turn this off. We're going to add this section. And as you see, we have a section 1 here. However, there's a new item on our to-do list. The section needs to have at least one control. Like I mentioned earlier, you need at least one section and at least one control. So here's where I would add the controls. Let me go ahead and close out that to-do list. And they're actually sorted for your convenience in simple, formatted, or advanced. Formatted being number, date, time, email, URL, or phone. So those are formatted values. Or advanced controls, like the location. We have advanced table controls, data grids, etc. We're going to add a simple one just for the sake of the demo. I'm going to add in a short text control. Now, something worth mentioning is if you are familiar with nFORM, you might recognize this section and this column. That's because we reused legacy items, but we are developing those as I'm recording this. So this is something that we're coming out with within the next version or two. And this is going to be revamped to help match the settings in this section list over here. Now, say I need a little bit more space. I feel a little claustrophobic. I can hide the sections here. Then I can go ahead and configure my control accordingly. Let's just add one in here just so I can show you guys what a finished to-do list looks like. I'm going to set up my max length and add in a tag. There we go. We have one control here. So this is going to be our really simple walkthrough form. And as you see, it's actually ready to publish. I can tell that by that green check mark up at the top. So if I click in, I even see that it's telling me it's ready to publish. So I can go ahead and publish the form by clicking on Publish, which is now lit up. I get a little notification that my form was published successfully. Let's change it back to a draft so we can finish up in the processing steps. These are going to be the post-submission processing steps. So different things like having somebody from your agency check and go through the form itself to make sure it's filled out properly. That's one of the more common uses. So I would add a step here. Admin check. I'm going to assign it to a specific person. We'll just do a random person here. You can also hide that from external users so they don't see these steps. And click OK. So that'll show up in that submission overview. So where we downloaded that payment voucher earlier, you would actually see these there. Let me actually go over to that and show you what the processing step looks like. Here's one that I labeled test. I should have named it something a little bit more descriptive, but this one's named test. Once it's complete, I would click complete. Again, right there, it would say something like, administrator, please check. And so then you would check it and it would complete it. So that's step 2 out of 2, complete. And it has a timestamp and who did it. You can also mark it incomplete. Say I did that by accident. And congratulations, you have completed a form. So you have everything that you need to go ahead and start and complete and publish a fully functional nFORM form. I hope this was a helpful walkthrough. And if you have any questions, please reach out to the email included in the description of this video. Thank you and have a great one.